Atepu, assalamu alaikum, namaste, haru nefer. This is Kasak Ma Keparu with another video for you. And in this video, I am going to be interviewing Shawn James. He's an author, a YouTube commentator about the Ahmaud Arbery's murder. But before I do that, I want you to hit the like button on this video. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live and when I upload recorded videos. Also, I do have free ebooks where you can learn more on my spiritual teachings. Just click on the links below and download those ebooks. And lastly, if you're not already a supporter of mine on Patreon, please consider doing so. You will get exclusive access to instructional videos on how to do Qigong, self-hypnosis, how to invoke ancestors, how to resurrect spirits, to help you in your life and protect you. A lot of good things. And you can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $1. $5 or $20 a month, and you can cancel at any time. And last, please share this video with family and friends so we can get this revolution started. So I doing a little bit of something different today, and I want to introduce a really great guy whose YouTube channel I have been following, and he's also an author. He's written a lot of books, and this guy's phenomenal. So I just want to bring him on real quick and introduce Shawn James. Hey, Shawn, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. And like I was saying, I've been following your channel, and you know, I follow a lot of channels, and there's some I resonate with, and others I just fall by the wayside because I don't feel that the information that they're sharing really is a real world experience. Some people talk all in theory, you know what I mean? But there's the practical application as to what's really going on out there and how they have solutions to deal with those issues is sometimes not appropriate. But with your channel, there's just so much good stuff, down from just the advice that you give, the perspective, even talking about how Black men should handle themselves in the workplace, and also your graphic novels. I've loved those. I've bought those. I've read those, and I think those are sensational. And I encourage everybody to get some. But you know, I brought you here because it's just really an honor, because I want to talk to you about Ahmaud Arbery's murder. And for those of you who are not aware of this, I don't know where you've been, but he is a young Black male in Georgia who was out jogging, and this father and son duo decided to go out in modern day lynching. They drove around in their pickup truck looking for what they call was a burglar, because they had said there were a number of burglaries in the area. Come to find out there weren't. And they saw Ahmaud jogging, and they stopped him, and consequently an altercation happened where Ahmaud lost his life. Now, it took 2 months to bring these two to justice. And if it wasn't for a video that was released by, I think, the two's lawyer, thinking it would really bolster their case, and it did the exact opposite. The video just showed that Ahmaud was really gunned down without cause. And there was a public outcry to arrest these two. And we also understand that the father may have connections with law enforcement, specifically part of the internal affairs, or which you would call it, to investigate police officers. So his father and son had connections to law enforcement. But the thing is, even if, what I want to keep in mind here, even if Ahmaud did do something, you don't have the right to go out there and murder a person in cold blood. You know, they did phone the police, and at that point, they should have left it up to the authorities to investigate and follow up. For them to go out there in this type of old-fashioned lynch mob and end with his life just shows you the climate we're living in this country and what's going on. But I think that Shawn's going to really give us a different perspective on this, in terms of, like, you know, because I think he has a really good purview into what's happening with Black men and what we need to do to protect ourselves. I think it's important because we need to be solution oriented and start looking at how do we deal with this, because this issue keeps coming up. I mean, I don't have to remind you about George Zimmerman, or even going many years before that with Emmett Till. When is it going to stop? What do we do to protect ourselves? So I want to introduce Shawn. How you doing?
I'm good, and thank you for having me on the show.
Great, wonderful. I'm glad you're here. So, I mean, can you just give us some of your perspective on the fact that it took 2 months for this father and son to be arrested. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy, insane. You know?
Well, I find it to be very sad that it took so long for this case to even come out here. I mean, over 2 months, no one even knew that this went on, and the media practically buried this story until just recently. So when I look at that whole part of it, it looks like there was some efforts to try to hide this story, and then when it came out, they didn't even want to try to give this man an opportunity to get due process. So it looks like there was a fix in from day one, and there's still a fix in as related to this whole Ahmaud Arbery situation. And it looks like to me that it's sadly, it shows us that nothing has really changed from what happened with Trayvon Martin. I mean, almost 10 years to the date of Trayvon Martin's passing at the hands of George Zimmerman, and we have yet another black man murdered by a group of these beta males out here, these beta male murderers who believe that they are above the law and that they can go out here and dictate how they're going to mete out justice when they have no authority to do so whatsoever. I mean, I really believe that with the whole Trayvon Martin situation, that's if Barack Obama had done something about that situation, a lot of these cases wouldn't be happening right now.
I think that's interesting that you brought that part up about Barack Obama, because I think prior to, let's say, the last couple of years, he was hailed as one of the best presidents, and I think now African Americans are now waking up to the fact that he literally did nothing for African Americans in this country. In fact, he furthered more of the gay rights agenda. You know,
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, my take on it is Barack Obama really failed when it came down to civil rights and protecting black people's civil rights. I mean, when I look at the whole Trayvon Martin murder case, he practically dropped the football as related to it, and deliberately did so because he didn't believe that he needed to do anything. I look at what he did, and it led to an escalation of these murders, his passiveness as related to this case of Trayvon Martin. And it practically led to a domino effect, which led to so many black men losing their lives. So when I look at the case of Barack Obama, he practically failed the black community, because as the president and the person running the executive branch, he could have set policy to really deal with these racists, these white supremacists, and set a boundary for them to let them know there is going to be a line established in the sand by the executive branch of the United States of America. But because he and his Attorney General, Eric Holder, were believing in this false concept of fairness, they thought they didn't need to do something about George Zimmerman. They thought, oh, we're going to follow the law as related to George Zimmerman on by the letter, not understanding that as a president, when you are running the country, you have to understand the spirit of the law. So he didn't really look out for the spirit of the law and protecting everybody's civil rights, because had he done that with George Zimmerman, had he set that line in the sand as related to George Zimmerman, it would have put all of these other racists on notice to let them know they would be punished for going out here and trying to murder or murdering a black man and going out here to attack black men. He could have done something about this and set that legal precedent, set that line in the sand, and really put that boundary up there so that these racists will understand that if they go after a black man in this country and try to profile him, target him, or harass him, they're going to have to deal with the consequences of the government. He could have set that legal precedent, but he didn't choose to do so. And as a result, so many black men have wound up losing their lives over the past decade.
You know, one thing, Shawn, just if you can lean to your right a little bit more, because you're leaning off screen a bit.
All right.
Yeah, there, that's perfect. One thing I wanted to point out, I'm not sure if the audience knows that, but Barack Obama instituted this, I think it was this policy of transgender bathrooms. And if states didn't comply, they were subject to federal lawsuits. And I was just like, I couldn't believe he was so much an advocate for that. But when it came to the rights of black males, He kind of just like let everything drop. Do you think, Shawn, that was just in a way him wanting to not seem that he was, because this is what I took from what he was doing. He was the first Black president, and he didn't want to seem like he was being unfairly in favor of African Americans. So in a way to compensate for that, he went the other direction and doing totally nothing. I'm just saying, that you think that he was trying to, because white America, listen, we know from like Wall Street, Black Wall Street, and that there can be an envious of a Black man who is affluent, doing well for himself. And there could be a bit of jealousy. And I feel that Barack Obama may have been sensitive to the fact that if he had shown any favoritism toward African Americans, it could have hurt his approval rating. What do you think about that?
I believe that he was just, again, so scared of offending white people and other non-Black people that he was too afraid to take action for Black people. And that was really the downfall of his presidency, because he promised hope and change to so many people, but he didn't deliver it to the group that was looking for it the most. I mean, Black people voted for Barack Obama 98% in 2008, 93% in 2012. And he was trying to call himself being the president of the United States, not understanding that Black people have been at a disadvantage for so many years. And here he had an opportunity to actually do something about these policies that were discriminatory against Black people. But instead, he decided to play the fairness game, which was really a fear game. He was really just too scared of offending people. But the way you have an impact is by taking risks and going out there and being bold. And I just find it interesting. He was so out here playing it safe that he didn't understand that his predecessors, George H.W. Bush, I mean, he went after those 4 white police officers who beat Rodney King in the aftermath of the riots. I mean, he filed federal civil rights charges against them, and there was a legal precedent there, and he could have easily applied that. But instead, he wanted to call himself being fair. But sadly, his enforcement of executive policy made things more unfair for Black people, because when he went out here and gave people like George Zimmerman a pass, that emboldened a lot of these racists out here. And it also led to the rise of your Donald Trump, because had he, as I saw it, shut down George Zimmerman, he would have actually cut off Donald Trump at the knees and practically destroyed the Trump presidency before it even got started.
Good point. Good point. Let me ask you this. Do you think that a lot of this stems from the fact that in reality, Barack Obama is not ADOS or foundational Black American?
I do believe that's part of it, because he was raised by a white grandmother and his mother was a white woman. So his first teacher of culture was not an ADOS Black woman who could teach him Black culture or teach him about Black history. I mean, for him, he didn't see himself as a Black man. If we look at Barack Obama's relationships, he primarily dated white women, and he saw himself as an honorary white man. I mean, he had African blood in him, but he did not see himself as a Black man. He did not see the same experiences that Black men have had, and he really didn't understand them because he came from that suburban area, and he didn't really connect with Black men and to understand our experiences. So he was disconnected from our experiences, and he fit the diversity quota for being Black on the outside, but on the inside, he was not connected to the Black community, Black people, or the Black experience.
And yeah, I think you're right, because and I'm not really sure. I don't want to misstate this, but I think it was the Congressional Black Caucus or some organization said that he was actually ignoring them or hostile toward them.
Yes, he was very hostile towards Black people. I mean, he practically talked down to everyone. He condescended to Black people. And that's one of the things that led to him alienating so many Black people over the course of the 8 years. And then that trickled down to the entire Democratic Party, because Black people just didn't, they were upset because this was supposed to be a president who was supposed to look out for their interests. And he expressed so much contempt for Black people because he didn't see himself as a Black man. He saw himself as a quote unquote American. And because he was an American, he went out here and discriminated against Black people, as I see it.
And you know what, Shawn? I don't buy the fact that there was a lot of theories that came out saying that he was waiting for the second administration to really implement policies for African Americans. I don't buy that. But they also, when you look at the fact that George Bush got us involved in, just basically took us to a war where, supposedly weapons of mass destruction, and they never found that. But he was able to implement that on his own, basically. I don't see why Barack Obama could not have done things to help African Americans, even though that he may have been opposed by Republicans. But the point I also want to make is this, or actually want to ask you about this. What do you think about? I voted for him the first time, but the second time, I didn't buy the Kool-Aid. I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. I saw what he was about. Why do you think African Americans still voted for him for a second term?
Well, a lot of black people voted for him because a lot of black people like to vote straight down the Democratic ticket. A lot of black people have been wedded to the Democratic Party for the last 50 years because they believe the rhetoric from Lyndon Baines Johnson, a known racist and a white supremacist, that they gave them the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 so that the Democrats were on their side. However, they don't see that that was passive aggressive in that you had, yes, Lyndon Johnson did sign those laws, but he was a really open racist behind the scenes. And he often said that he did these things like a chess move in order to ensure that black people would continue voting for the Democratic Party. And he said that he would get N-words to be voting for the next 200 years for Democrats. So a lot of black people were voting for Democrats until Barack Obama promised the hope and change. And when he did not deliver on the hope and change, a lot of black people started turning away, especially a lot of black men who saw that with these numerous deaths, starting with Trayvon Martin, we were going to see this domino effect all the way down to Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. So they saw that they weren't getting any tangibles as related to justice. They weren't getting any tangibles as related to a legal system that would make things where they would get protections. So a lot of black men, this is what led to a lot of them leaving the Democratic Party in 2016 and voting for Donald Trump, because 7% of black men walked away from the whole Democratic Party altogether. And a good majority of people stopped voting in 2016 because they saw no tangibles coming at all.
Do you attribute, because a lot of people make this this statement that we know that the unemployment rate was at an all-time low prior to COVID-19 under Trump. Do you think it is directly attributed to Trump, or is it spillover from the Obama administration?
Well, I can say that I haven't been able to find a job under it, but I can say that that these policies have changed. I don't connect it to Donald Trump or Barack Obama. I really believe that we're in this economic cycle, because I studied economics when I was in college, and every economic cycle goes on like this. There's a trough period, then there's a rise, then there's a decline, and then there's a recession. But as I see it, we just came out of the worst economic cycle, and Barack Obama's policies really did not have much effect at all as related to the economy. In fact, if you look at his Affordable Care Act, it practically crippled so many companies, because a lot of small businesses, they could not really hire more employees. And that's due to the mandated, you have to give your employees health care, which really cut into their costs. I mean, that's something people don't want to talk about. But when I look at the economy, it has a cycle to it. And the policies, depending on the president, they can have an impact or they can be negligible. Now, Trump's economy was a very strong economy, but the whole thing is that we really don't know, because these economic cycles they happen. And I mean, if you look at Bill Clinton's economy, he had a really strong economy due to all the rise of IT, but we have economic cycles. But Barack Obama's policies really didn't help the economic cycle get started. I mean, if it wasn't for that tax package, we really wouldn't have had that momentum that really built up the Trump economy and got it really fired up.
Do you? This is kind of what I heard, but that Barack actually cut funding to HBCs.
I didn't hear that he cut funding to HBCUs, but he didn't really make an effort to support them. Again, he was very passive aggressive in that he would ignore people and not try to support Black institutions. I mean, he really expressed a lot of contempt for Black institutions. And he didn't actively go out here to support them because, again, he wanted to play this whole fairness game and play this game where he was going to be the president of all of the United States, not understanding that that black foundation was the thing that got him momentum. I mean, if it wasn't for all those black people who supported him, he would not even be in that place. And he didn't really appreciate that support. And that's why he practically destroyed, as I see it, destroyed Democratic Party overall. I mean, his decisions to alienate core bases is why the Democrats are struggling right now, because he didn't make an effort to look at the big picture and say, look, my decisions not only affect me, but they also affect the overall party.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think now we're living interesting times because on the table we can see now, you can agree or disagree because of organizations like movements like ADOS, we see that reparations is on the table. We see that there, for the first time, there is a discussion about this. Now, I say that to set it up in this way. Although we are now having serious talks about things like reparations, we are still in the same situation going back to Ahmaud Arbery's murder. And this is basically letting us know, and we should be aware of this, that I don't think we're going to be able to depend on our government or federal intervention to stop this in any way, these murders. So do you see this as more of a case of each family taking necessary precautions, or black men in general doing things differently to prevent these things from happening?
Well, what happened is when it comes down to a lot of these cases is we have a generational disconnect, and this generational disconnect comes from the lack of fathers in the home, and those fathers were not there to teach these boys the unwritten social rules for having social interactions in society. Now, back when I was a kid during the 80s, I had a father, I had a brother, I had men in the community to teach me about how to socially interact. And a lot of these boys, they don't have that. And because they don't have that, they were not able to learn the unwritten social rules for socially interacting in public. Because when you're a black man, you have to understand you have a target on your back practically every day. And if you don't understand how to go out here and navigate the world, you're going to make that target on your back bigger, and you're going to make that target on your back turn into a situation where your life can be put at risk. And a lot of these young men, they bought into the integrationist Kool-Aid, the rainbow Kool-Aid, and they don't understand that a black man is considered an enemy of the state, an enemy of the world, an enemy of white supremacy. And he has to watch himself when he's out here. So he cannot go out here and think that he has the same freedoms that other people, like white people and other races, have. He has to be very careful about how he does things, because I not only see with this case of the young man who was murdered in Georgia, but I see it with the case of Bakari Henderson. I see it with so many young black males. They're not being taught what they need to survive out here. And because they're not being taught what they need to survive out here, these unwritten social rules, this is winding up leading to them losing their lives.
Well, you know, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because a counter argument to be made is well, we are citizens of this country. We did build this country, as the foundational Black Americans, or ADOS, would say. We have a stake in this country. Why should we have to change our behavior patterns to accommodate racist activity?
Well, the whole thing is it's about survival. And I mean, this is something a lot of black men today don't understand. I had that same argument when I was a kid, but as soon as I started seeing a lot of run-ins I was having with store owners and people following me, that I had to adapt. I mean, if you want to survive out here, you have to understand these unwritten social rules, because one of these interactions, it could not only lead to you not just having a confrontation, it can also lead to you winding up losing your life. It's not something that is fair for black people as related to our rights, but it's something we've learned how to do in order to survive.
Now, I want to point out something, and this is coming from my own experience as well, so it's not something I'm pulling out of a hat, is that my mother never had to talk with me about what to do when you are encountering police force. In fact, the way I was brought up was, you know, the world is your oyster. You have an opportunity to, if you work hard, to get anything you want. And I bought into that. But then when I got to the corporate world, I saw people who looked like me, even preventing me from climbing the corporate ladder. I saw the police, you know, basically pulling me over for no reason, violating my rights. So I can attest to that. I do think that you have families that are not having these discussions with Black men. And also, given the fact that I think you and I talked about this earlier, that I think Black men have picked up a lot of feminine traits from their mothers.
I have to agree with that.
Being raised in single parent households is that, and I've witnessed this personally, where I've seen interactions with Black women, with store owners, Black women with police, where they're very boisterous talking back, and the police give them a little bit of leeway. With a Black man, the slightest thing that you say or the slightest move you make can end your life. What do you think about that?
Yeah. When it comes down to a lot of the single mothers out here, yeah, they are really doing a disservice to their sons because they don't understand that the world is different for Black men than it is for Black women. Now, when it comes down to Black women, they can go out here and mouth off and argue with these white authority figures because they tolerate their behavior. But when it comes down to a Black man, he can't do these things. And the thing is that he's not being taught at an early age that the world is going to see you differently. The world sees you as a Black man. It sees you as a threat. And the slightest gesture you make can possibly lead to you losing your life. This is something that boys aren't being taught because the woman, she sees the world from her perspective. And she's bought into this concept from feminism that boys and girls are equal. This is something I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis, because a lot of these boys, they're males in crisis because they're taught these feminine life skills and these feminine survival skills. And because they're taught the feminine life skills, they see the world the same way a female sees the world. They think that they're going to get all these benefits and privileges because they're female, but they don't understand that the world sees a Black man as an enemy. It sees him as a threat. And the things that that woman can do are things that you just can't do.
Can you also touch on that as it relates to corporate America? Because when I got into corporate America and started to see this firsthand, it was a shock. And I'll give you an example. I would notice how my white boss would interact with a Black female coworker, and could be, you know, she could talk back, and he was like, "Oh, she's just being sassy." When I said something, I was literally on the verge of being written up.
Oh, I've run into that myself. I mean, when you're in a corporate environment, oftentimes you're also, again, you're seen as the angry Black man. You're seen as the hostile Black man. I remember on one job, I was working at a law firm and I was answering phones and everybody was seeing me as hostile. I was talking to them just like I'm talking to you. And they would considered me to be this hostile person. I'm sitting there going, how am I hostile to you? I'm just talking to you directly. Again, as they project ideas onto Black men. And in corporate America, you have a lot of enemies, especially Black men. You have enemies there. I mean, not only are the white guys your enemies, you also have some of these Black guys who come from the elite class. You have some of the Black women out here who are hostile towards you. So it's a real minefield being in a corporate environment. And a guy could it's like, that's why a lot of Black men don't usually last that long there, because you have so many enemies there that you practically are, it's like you get shell shocked. I remember I was working at a predominantly Black nonprofit, and it was just like a shocker to me when I ran into that. I thought I was doing well there, and then the guy just decides he has no place for me in the organization, just decides he doesn't want me there because he's uncomfortable with the idea of competing. And that's another thing that Black men run into is a lot of these people, they don't want to compete with you. They see you as a threat to their livelihoods. So they try to find ways to cut you down and take you out.
On that note, I want to bring up a subject. I don't know if you've touched on this in your books, but it's something that I've noticed and talked about, and it's twofold, and I want you to comment on both. First thing is when I work as a consultant sometimes, so I go to many different companies. So I've had a lot of experience in very different environments, but there was one thing always consistent. When I went to the HR department, it was full of Black women. When I looked at the company itself, it was predominantly white. Big disparity there. I don't know how that's allowed to happen when the majority of people in HR are Black women. The other thing I've noticed, which is a recent trend, is I've noticed that even though I could work hard, do my best, I noticed that they are more inclined to promote and work with gay Black men. And I believe that's because they don't represent a threat. Can you comment on that?
Well, when it comes down to HR, they usually hire a lot of Black women there because they feel that they won't be a threat to the operations. It allows them to meet their diversity quota. So when people make a claim of discrimination against the company, they can say, point to their HR department and say, yes, we have some Black people here. We have lots of Black women working here. And that allows them to meet the diversity quota as related to the EEOC guidelines. It allows them to kill two birds with one stone. It allows them to have a woman and a minority and meet that quota. And it means that they don't have to deal with any sort of backlash as related to being considered a racist company. So they oftentimes hire the Black woman to avoid dealing with discrimination issues. And when it comes down to the gay Black man, they also bring him in so they can also kill those two birds with one stone. But the whole thing is that this is done, again, in another passive aggressive fashion. Yes, passively, you're hiring so-called minorities, but aggressively, you are crippling the Black economy because when Black men, or heterosexual Black men, are out here and they're working, they represent somebody who can build an economy. And when it comes down to these companies, they don't want to compete with Black men, and they don't want Black men building because when Black men build, they represent competition. So they're going to go out here and get the gay Black man because the gay Black man is no threat to them. He's no threat to their economy. He's like the Black woman is a consumer, not a producer, and he's not a competitor. So because when it comes down to gay Black men, there aren't that many of them. So when they hire them, it benefits them economically overall because every heterosexual Black man that gets hired, he represents one, competition, and two, he represents somebody who will go out here and build for himself. And when men are building, they're building wealth, that takes money out of the overall American economy, and especially the white economy. And that's why they would go out here and hire women and gays over heterosexual Black men.
And with that said, I want to talk about one of the most useless government organizations there is, which is the EEOC. I've had a lot of dealings with them, and I have not found in any instances that they were of any help whatsoever. In fact, there are a number of individuals I have as friends that work in the HR, and they say that when they get a notice from EEOC, it doesn't make them, they don't get afraid. It's not a big bother to them. Let me ask you this: is the alternative, which again, when we're looking at new things on the table, such as reparations, I'm seeing now more discussions and more talk about building an economic structure. Is that a viable alternative to the corporate world, or are we going to see something very similar happen with building it up being burned down like Black Wall Street?
I believe that it is a viable alternative, but Black people have to come and support it. I mean, we can go out here and build our own economic system, and we can go out here and build a platform to protect it. Now, the big problem with Black folks as related to building is a lot of people still have fear as related to the trauma of Black Wall Street, but we have to learn our lessons from that tragic period, and we have to go on. I mean, one of the worst things that we ever did was not go out here and build again. We should have gone out here and built again, and then also gone out here and built up a force to protect our institutions and protect our businesses. That's what we're going to have to do now if we go out here and build another Black community and Black businesses, is we're going to have to find a way to protect those businesses, because when it comes down to a lot of these whites and non-Blacks, they don't want to compete with a Black economy, because a Black economy means Black dollars are staying in the Black community. Black dollars are employing Black people, and Black dollars are not flowing out of the Black community to enrich others so they can live a lavish lifestyle. I mean, 97, 98% of Black dollars flow out of the Black community to other communities and enriches them and allows them to live well. I mean, Asians practically control our hair market and are billionaires as a result of them taking Black dollars. You have all of these Arab stores, they're making money off Black dollars. people are getting rich off the black dollar, but if black people started taking the black dollar and investing it in ourselves, we could be the second most powerful economy in the world, as I see it. And we have to work towards building that and building something to protect it.
There's an argument that's being made, especially with a lot of I don't even want to call them educated Black people, but they make the argument about how bad integration was for us because it destroyed Black businesses. And my point is this, and you can give me your perspective. I think that is the most unintelligent, ignorant thing to say, where you're basically saying that integration was wrong. You're trying to say that you want the government to dictate where you can go, like how, what, basically watch your actions. And we see this happening with COVID-19. And that's what segregation was about. Integration was about trying to open up the doors. And we have to keep in mind that most people who speak about this subject are not aware of it, that it wasn't separate and equal, that the Black businesses during integration, a lot of them, Black schools, weren't on par with the white schools, which is why a lot of parents sent their kids to the white schools, which is why a lot of people abandoned those Black businesses to support the white businesses, because the products were not on par. Some were and some weren't. But to make this blanket argument that integration was bad because we lost our Black businesses, I think it's an oversimplification of the issue. What's your perspective on it?
Well, when it came down to this whole separate but equal thing, the whole thing is it was substandard for Black people because we weren't allowed to compete. And the whole thing about separate was equal was they always gave us substandard, and they didn't give us the funding we were supposed to have. Like for a lot of our schools, yes, we had separate schools, but a lot of times those schools were not allowed to have equal funding because politicians like your Bull Connor back in the day, what they would do was take that money and funnel it and embezzle it, and they would not give you equal funding. I mean, that a lot of Black public schools could have been better, but they weren't allowed to have the same economic resources. That's how separate but equal was really unequal. And a lot of Black businesses, they weren't allowed to really compete because every time a Black business started to get to the point where it was starting to make real inroads, Ku Klux Klan would burn that business down or would terrorize the people, and they were never really allowed to compete. Now, integration, it really hurt a lot of the Black businesses because they wound up with a lot of people with this perception of the white man's ice being colder. But that was really a false perception because a lot of the Black businesses were never allowed to really have that opportunity to compete on the same level or to raise their standards or even improve the quality of their products because a lot of these white people, they really didn't want to compete with Black people. So what they would do is make it where our stuff appeared to be inferior. But if we had an equal and really balanced opportunity, I believe Black businesses could compete. And the whole thing is that the integration, it was a complete failure because it was actually rigged against Black people, and it was rigged to make it where Black people would think that they could go get this so-called better product from white people. But if they had been given a fair shake from the Reconstruction on, we could have seen a completely different Black community overall.
I think that's a good point that you just brought up. Absolutely. From Reconstruction on, if we had been given a fair shake at that point, then things would have been different. But I don't like the excuse that because, like you said, we thought the white man's ice was colder, that we ran to support their business, that it wasn't the pulling away of restrictions that necessarily caused the problem. It was a lot of our ideology that caused a loss in Black businesses being supported. But on that same note, what do you think about getting this playing field equal through reparations? Do you think this is going to make any headway?
I think it can make some headway if we educate people in what they need to do with their economic resources, educate people on the importance of building wealth, the importance of building an economic base, because the thing that really hurts our community is we don't really have a good education on economics. A lot of Black people, they just think, I'm just going to get this money and I'm going to go out here and have a bunch of money, but they're not thinking about money as a resource for building. When you have money, it's a resource, and our perception of money is just we're going to use it to buy social currency. not understanding social currency does not have any value. It's a point I made in Stop Simping, my book. And it's something that boys and men have to learn early on, that when you have money, it is a resource, it is a tool, and you can use it to advance yourself and build yourself up. And this is something we have to learn how to start doing, is using the resources around us to build. And it's something we're not doing much out here, because we're thinking that social currency has a higher value, but you use money to build wealth. I mean, if we get this reparations, you should be focused on things like, as I see it, buying real estate, building and creating businesses so you can hire your own people and put people to work. That's something I try to do whenever I'm out here. When I'm publishing a book, I'm looking to hire a Black artist to do covers and pinups and stuff like that. Every dollar you give to another Black person allows money to stay in your community, and every business you have and you help out, you continue to build wealth in your community overall. So it's about not only when we get the reparations, it's about keeping that money in the community towards building a better Black community and improving the quality of life for all Black people in the community.
Well, Shawn, here's my concern. You can give me your opinion on this, because I'm very critical of the capitalist system, because I believe, especially with Black people still are coming out of the traumatization of slavery. So we do have certain tendencies that we bring with us, such as immediate gratification. And we've never had enough money to where we could take and put away and not touch it, like in CDs and stocks and things of that nature. So whatever we get tends to be spent. This is why we're consumers. But the thing that concerns me is the over-reliance on capitalism, specifically in making super capitalists. Let's make Kanye a billionaire. Let's make what's his name, Jay-Z, a billionaire. And I'm one person who went through the Reagan era, where the whole idea was trickle down economics. You support those at the very top with the idea that they will fund smaller businesses, the money will trickle down, and that will help the economy. I don't ever see that happen, specifically because when I see us creating these super capitalists, these so-called Kanye West or Jay-Z, that the businesses that they do start are all fashion, music, things that are not going to empower the Black community. And I am from the school of, if you're going to really build an economic infrastructure in the Black community, it needs to come in the way of a business that can employ a lot of African Americans, such as like the old days when we saw the Industrial Revolution with the warehouses and everything, where you can give a large percentage of the population, community, jobs. We're not seeing that. We're seeing things that, t-shirt companies, sneaker companies, where you have robotics can put that together instantly, or you can go overseas and get child labor to make those things very inexpensively, and there is no money going back into the Black community. What do you think about that?
Well, I am not a fan of investing in making people billionaires, because to me, that's building wealth for one individual, and that individual may or may not have an interest in supporting and protecting the Black community. As I see it, if you go out here and you make a billionaire, a lot of times these guys are not looking out for us. So I'm more of a guy who says, let's try to build up a lot of the smaller businesses, because a lot of 60% of America's economy is run by small businesses, and many of the innovations, they come from small businesses. So I oftentimes think that one of the best things you can do is build up small businesses, because when you build small business, what you're going to do is create entrepreneurs, and you're also going to give Black men and women purpose. And that's very important as related to building a community, because when people have a focus and they have a purpose, they are thinking about building something. And when they have ownership of something, they see a value as related to themselves and as related to the community. So I really want to focus on building small businesses, because when small businesses grow into larger businesses, people oftentimes have a personal connection to them, a personal investment. And when they hire employees, oftentimes those employees are more passionate about their work, more committed to their work, and they love what they're doing. So they're going to go out here and do their very best. So I'm all about getting more small businesses in the Black community, not these things like t-shirt companies or jeans and sneakers. I mean, I see a lot of different guys out here doing different types of businesses, different products. I mean, things that can be scaled up, things that can lead to employment of other Black people. I mean, we've got to come out of that mentality of doing things like the rib shacks, the t-shirt, the jeans and the sneakers. I mean, those are consumer products. We have to start focusing on things as related to production, because when you're a producer and you're producing products and services that help people, you are creating economic, not only economic wealth, but you're also creating businesses that will become an asset to a community and be something that is considered essential as related to not only building the community, but maintaining the standards and quality of life of a community. I mean, in jeans and sneakers and stuff like that, yeah, it looks good. It has social currency, but it doesn't really add any sort of, economic value or economic wealth. And we have to get out of that whole consumer mindset and start focusing on a producer mindset.
I totally agree. Taking it back to Ahmaud Arbery, I want to ask you this: what the final solution to this? Because we seem to be very reactionary. These things happen. We march. We rely on the government intervention or the police to police themselves, or employing these Black lawyers to file cases, which is again reactionary and that doesn't really have preventative measures in place. What do we do with this situation?
Well, we have to take this on a two-pronged approach. One, we have to go out here and start teaching our young men about those unwritten social rules so that they can try to avoid these dangerous situations with these dysfunctional beta white males out here who believe that they can go out here and try to be a police officer when they're not. And two, we have to start exercising our political power. And the way we do that is we start making demands of our politicians and let them know that if we don't get tangible justice, we're not going to vote for them. And if they don't make efforts to deal with these people by setting boundaries as related to their behavior, they can consider losing the Black vote in the next election. Because politicians only respond when people go out here and let them know that their votes you're not going to vote straight down a ticket. They're only going to vote when they get their demands met. So when it comes down to Black people, we have to make ourselves known. We have to assert ourselves, because that's the only way we're going to get justice in these situations, and the way we are also going to protect ourselves in the long term. So it's a two-pronged approach. We have to deal with not only the short term as related to the incident, but in the long term, deal with them by teaching our young men about these unwritten social rules so that they know to just not deal with these people in their communities and not deal with them overall.
Well, that's a good point. I think I see politicians like Biden, for the first time in a while, I see them start to react to us and start to listen to us, whereas before they just ignored us, But the thing I want to talk about, which leads into something I think is dangerous, I'm seeing now where Black people are picking up on this whole idea of the Second Amendment. So what they're doing is, especially we see on social media, these photos of Black people bearing arms and automatic weapons. And I just say you got to be a little more like strategic in your thinking of how you handle the situation. What do you think about that?
Well, when it comes down to the right to bear arms, I am a good supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe it's an important law in our Constitution. But a lot of Black people, what they're doing when they start taking these guns out, they're acting just like those beta white male racists and trying to show out. And that's something we don't need to do. I mean, part of having a strategy is people not knowing what you have. And in a chess game, you don't want to make moves that let the other players know what you're doing, because oftentimes these players are looking to get 7 steps ahead of you. And when you make an emotional reaction, like showing off guns and stuff, you're letting people know what you have. You're letting them know what you're going to do. And it makes you really weak and vulnerable. You really don't want to be out here with this stuff. I mean, people with power don't have to show their power. They just are powerful, and they show their power by taking action. This is that really allow them to use their power. I mean, a powerful man does not need to show a gun. An insecure man needs to show a gun, because that's what I used to see back when I was in high school and junior high school. A lot of these drug dealers, they were very insecure, so they would go around running around with these guns in their waistbands and guns in their pockets, trying to impress these women and trying to look like a big shot. But they didn't see how weak they were looking, because when everybody knows what you are and they know how you're going to react, they have leverage over you, and they've gained an advantage over you strategically.
Exactly. And Shawn, I want to show you something. We're going to get to the conclusion on this, but I want to share something with you, which to me exemplifies the problem that we have in our communities. And if you just give me a moment, I'm going to bring it up on my screen, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about it, because I want to hear your reaction to this. And let me just share my screen. I'm going to bring it. Here we go. And this was one of this family. It's a black woman and black male. I guess taking matters into their own hands, saying what they're going to do. And this is images of a black woman holding her weapon, and her son is in the background, and the husband is actually taking the photograph. And I did a video on this, and I say, to me, this doesn't demonstrate beta male behavior. I don't know what to say. Where you're having where you're having your woman standing in front of your house holding your weapon. I don't know. What do you think of that?
That definitely is beta male behavior, and it's also feminine behavior. I mean, she's got all these guns on display, but what she doesn't understand, like many of these beta males I've seen who have these arsenals, you only have two hands, and then you need both of them to hold one weapon. So you're trying to show out to people that, oh, you're going to stand up to them, but people are looking at you and seeing, again, weakness, because one, you're showing everybody all your weapons, and two, you're showing people that you really are not secure in yourself, because you have to show off all these weapons to show how you're going to fight these guys. So that shows complete weakness. Again, smart man never shows his weapons. He oftentimes knows how to use different strategies without ever firing a single shot. So when you have a man, he's not going to try to show you his weapons until he's ready to show them. And usually, again, he's going to wait. He's going to know that if I show everything off in the beginning, that's going to give my opponents leverage, and it's going to give them an advantage, because they now know what I know.
I'm going to ask you a question. This is a little bonus question here. I'm not sure if you're familiar with. I'm in Las Vegas. And
yeah.
The history of Las Vegas is started by the mob.
Yeah, I know. I saw it in Bugsy, and I also studied the history of Las Vegas.
Oh, so you're all right. Great. So I want to ask you a question. Knowing the mob's attitude on, family and things of that nature, why is George Zimmerman still around? Why is Emmett Till's the white lady still around? Can you answer me that?
Well, that's because a lot of black people are they're not very strong. They're not united, and the whole thing is that we have a lot of beta males in our community, and they really are afraid of white people, and they're so afraid that they don't want to take any action. Like Barack Obama, they're afraid that if they do something, they're going to upset people, and it's going to lead to a riot or something like that. So they don't really want to take any sort of action against people like George Zimmerman out of fear, but there's really nothing to really fear. I mean, when it came down to George Zimmerman, we could have done something about him years ago, and I mean over a decade ago. This man should have been in a federal prison had Barack Obama had a backbone, and he would have been dealt with by any other community. I mean, if he had did this to one of these other groups out here, like the Muslims, he would have been dealt with. But in America, black people are just too scared. They don't have any backbone, and they don't stand. And because they don't stand, that's why they don't get respect.
And I bring the mob up, or the Italians up, because they have a really good sense of family, and right and wrong, and retribution. And I just think there's something that we can learn from that. So Shawn, what's next for you? I know you're writing, and what's next for you?
Well, currently I have a couple of books out right now. I have, let me see. John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, which is currently on Amazon right now in paperback and Kindle format. I have ISIS, The Main Event, which is available in paperback. I'm going to leave a link in the chat to both of these. And I'm currently working on the 2021 catalog of books, which is ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, and I have John Haynes, Taking Care of Business, coming out. And I also have a vampire novel coming out called Eternal Night that I'm still working on the second draft of. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's something I'm working on. And I'm still, pushing and promoting The Man Crisis, which passed over 300 sales just a couple months ago. Right. So The Man Crisis has passed over 300 sales, and people are they're buying it because the book has really transformed a lot of lives. And I want to do another nonfiction, but I don't want to mess things up. I originally planned a book to deal with these unwritten social rules that boys aren't being taught, but I just decided to scrap that book out of. I didn't want the races to know what we knew, so I had planned a book called The Black Man's Guide to Surviving, which was going to teach those unwritten social rules a lot of these young brothers aren't learning, like Bakari Henderson, like Ahmaud Arbery, like Trayvon Martin. A lot of these young brothers are not being taught, so I wanted to do a book to teach them these unwritten social rules that I learned that helped me survive. But I was afraid that people would come out, white folks would get the hold of this information and then find ways to go against us. So that was one of the reasons why I didn't do the book, but I'm really thinking it.
Now, I know that you are, because when I was growing up, I went to art school, and you are active in the goth community. How are they receptive to blacks in that community?
They're very receptive. I've gotten nothing but love from people in the scene. People have been very supportive of me. When I came out with Spinsterella, they were the first group that actually actively went out here and let people know that the book was available. They have been heavily supporting the books of the Spinsterella trilogy. I mean, it's a very open scene, but there is racism in that scene as well. From some people, but most of the people there are very kind, very polite, very friendly, and they have gone out of their way to really help me out in getting the word out about the books, and they have been really, really supportive. I mean, when I do goth live streams, I get people all over the world who pick them up and support it, and they are the ones who they come out. When I announce a book that's goth, they'll come out in numbers.
Oh, great. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. I'm going to put the links in the description box for those who want to pick up a copy of the books. I think The Man Crisis, everyone should have a copy of that. That is awesome. And not many people are doing the work that Shawn is doing and getting this information out there, and also talking about the subject matter. Shawn, any final thoughts?
Well, when it comes down to Ahmaud Arbery, I'm really saddened to hear about this brother's passing. And it's even sadder that even almost 10 years after the death of Trayvon Martin, that this young man lost his life. And sadly, we could have saved this man's life if people in politics were active about looking out for black men like Barack Obama and many others. And I really want to see, I don't want to just see this case done as an individual case. I want to see policy that prevents the loss of another young man's life like Ahmaud Arbery. I want to see people really deal with this, because it really ties into the man crisis, because we have a man crisis in the black community as related to these young black men not being taught the male survival skills that they need. And we also have a man crisis in the white community, which is breeding all of these dysfunctional beta males who believe that they need to go out here and use a gun, and they need to go out here and play vigilante instead of letting law enforcement deal with these situations. Because when I look at this whole situation with Ahmaud Arbery, these beta males, they have no right to call themselves being the judge and the jury, and they have no right to come in here and try to play policeman the same way George Zimmerman tried to play policeman. They don't have the training. They don't have the understanding of how policing works. They don't understand that there's a way we do things. I mean, you don't go out here with a gun to confront somebody on property that is not even yours. Because I saw it with George Zimmerman almost 10 years ago. He was out here trying to play cop. And again, a lot of these beta males, they want to call themselves being the so-called policemen, but they don't want to follow procedure. They don't want to follow training. This is one of the reasons why George Zimmerman wound up getting fired from his security guard jobs. He didn't want to follow procedure, and he didn't understand that procedure was there not only to protect the individuals, but it was also to protect him. And that's why he got fired from those jobs. And this guy, he didn't understand that him and his son didn't understand that if there's stuff going on, you let law enforcement deal with it because they understand what procedures are meant to be done. But when I look at this whole case, we really need that it really illuminates this man crisis and how a lot of our boys, they're not being taught to be men, they're taught to be males, and they don't really know how to navigate the world in a way that helps them understand how to do things like problem solving, conflict resolution, or how to think critically.
Do you think it's a problem? Can you say, well, it's not just black males, but it's millennials in general?
Yeah, some of it is millennials, but a lot of it has to do with our completely damaged family structure. I mean, we have a really bad family structure after the 1960s, where a lot of these males are not being taught the skills that they need. So we have a lot of men out here. They're trying to follow these ideas about manhood, but they don't really understand what it means to be a man.
Is that coming from, I'm sorry, throwing more question at you. Is that coming from black women jumping on like third wave feminism? And you think it's coming from that? Or?
Yes, I do definitely believe it's coming from black women jumping on this, I'd say second wave feminism, because the second wave feminism is a thing that did so much damage to the black family, because that's where we got the rhetoric about the strong, independent black woman, about not needing a man, about their having no value of fathers, because an entire generation grew up with that. And I grew up with some of that media telling you didn't need fathers in the home. Men had no value. Men had no worth. And it was all about what a man could do for you financially, but not about this man having value as a leader, an authority figure, a head of household, and that this man teaches valuable lessons to his son that prepare him for the world when he goes out into that world. And without those skills, he's not going to be able to function. And when you have men out here who are not taught these male life skills and male survival skills, they wind up going out here and either they wind up destroying the world around them, or they wind up self-destructing by committing suicide or getting addicted to not only drugs and alcohol, but other things as well, like obsessions with hobbies and things like that. I've seen that where you have people who are collecting things and they're just practically, the stuff has them and they don't have themselves. And these men, they're not learning balance. And this is something that a father helps in preparing his son, as he teaches him how to be a balanced individual. And a son needs a father. And this is something that I'm seeing more and more, is that boys need a man to teach them, and also girls, because I'm also seeing that. I did a live stream about that, about how a lot of girls are messed up because they didn't get their fathers in their lives. So we're seeing a lot of these problems because we have this man crisis in this country and we're not really dealing with it or even acknowledging it. I mean, some people are out in the men going their own way community, but for overall, we have a man crisis that nobody's really dealing with. And it's creating an entire third generation of dysfunctional men.
Do we need to actively start building a black male patriarchy in the black community?
Yes, we definitely do. We definitely need to start working on building a foundation, because when you have men in the community teaching and preparing other men, that starts laying the foundation for a patriarchy. And when you have patriarchal leadership, the young men have a sense of purpose. They have an understanding of their roles as men. They have an understanding of what they need to do as men. And they have that sense of confidence that they can go out here and do for self. And one of the great intangibles of working with other men and having a father in your life is that confidence, because that confidence is what encourages a boy to go out here and take an active role, take that leadership role, and really start going out here and doing things like taking risks, taking on challenges, when they fail, going out here and trying again. And that all of that comes from patriarchy, because the father is going to teach his son these valuable life skills. And when you have a community of men, they're going to teach and prepare those men with those intangible life skills that are going to lead to tangible results.
Do you think it's possible, given the fact that the black female matriarchy is supported by the white structure?
I think it's possible for us to build a black patriarchy, even though you have the welfare state and the government supporting black women. I believe we can create that patriarchal structure, because when it comes down to it, when you have men teaching other men, it's going to be a stronger community economically, and it's going to be a stronger community socially, because under male leadership, people grow and thrive, whereas under female leadership, you have a community that's practically dying on the vine, and it's dying because these males just can't function, these females just can't function. And it may take maybe 50 years, 100 years, but the male patriarchy is going to be a stronger community, but that community can only start when we start actively going out here to build it.
You know, Shawn, in your opinion, what happened? I remember going to visit my family, and all the males I saw were very quiet in the background, and the women were talking, yelling, over talking them. And even, this is years ago when I was in my teens, and I even knew something was wrong then. What happened to these black males?
Well, a lot of these black men, a lot of them were broken as a result of being in these relationships with a lot of toxic women. And they were also broken down by these jobs. So a lot of men, they had a lot of stress on them, and they couldn't really push back because they had so much pressure on them. I mean, a lot of black men, they had so much pressure on them from these jobs where their boss was constantly threatening to fire them over the least little thing. They had a lot of pressure on them from the woman who could all just call 911 and practically destroy your entire life. They had pressure on them from the courts. I mean, a black man has a lot of pressure on him, and he has to deal. That's why black men wind up passing away at such an early age, because you come into it with just all of this stress and anxiety. I mean, you don't know what day, if the next day is going to be your last day, and you don't know what little thing can lead to you wind up losing your life. So you have a lot of pressure on you, and a lot of guys, they just shut down because they figure it's just not worth it to keep fighting, because there's some battles they can't win, so they just wind up giving up.
You know, for a while, I saw MGTOW gaining traction, and I don't believe it's a viable solution. What do you think about that?
The men going their own way is not really for black men, as I see it overall. I mean, it's a good start. I like a lot of the principles of it as related to starting a man to learning about manhood, because the things that they're talking about, putting men first, taking care of yourself first, and looking out for yourself, those are good principles. I like the principles of it, but as a philosophy, it's a good philosophy to start with, but eventually you're going to have to move out of that philosophy into the spiritual. So I don't really see it as anything outside of getting men started towards going towards God. So, and because God teaches the original foundations of manhood, and this is about, like I said, God working in mysterious ways, where he gets men back off of this feminist track and this gynocentric track, and gets men on the track back to being in their natural roles.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shawn. I really appreciate this. This is very enlightening. I mean, I learned a lot myself. And it just shows that we have a lot of work to do. But there is hope. Things that you're saying, I definitely see some headway. It's not as if we're talking about things that are not being done. I'm seeing, although small in measure, I do see steps being taken in that direction. And I'm really optimistic about things. Whereas before, I'm going to be honest with you, looking back 5 years ago, I just didn't think there was hope for us. Now I'm seeing really good discussions online about the patriarchy needing to be put in place, about reparations, about men being too feminine. I'm like, wow, there is a recognition that there's a problem, and now we're taking these small steps to work on them. And I'm like, there is hope.
Yeah, we're making progress. I mean, with more men talking to each other, and that's one of the things that's important is men talking to each other, and that's how men sharpen each other and develop each other. And that's something that I liked about the social media, is that we're seeing men talking to each other, connecting with each other, and really rediscovering their manhood, because this gynocentric media we've had over the last 20, 25 years, it's all about the woman. And now men are learning that they have a voice, they have a right to things, and they have a right to ask for things. Whereas in the gynocentric era, everything was about pleasing the woman, appeasing the woman, making the woman happy, and getting everything for her. But in this media, we are seeing men thinking about themselves, men thinking about the goals they want to pursue, men putting themselves first. And these are things that men need to learn how to do.
What do you think? I mean, because to speak of that, we have now Hollywood gone total. What is the? I love what he said. You never go full retard, and I feel like Hollywood's gone full retard with their gynocentric films like Terminator and Star Wars. What do you think? I mean, and these movies are losing money.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
Well, they're thinking that if they keep making this type of media, what will happen is people will eventually start buying into it. They think if they flood the media with so much of this media, eventually you'll start believing it. Because the whole thing with Hollywood is they want you to keep watching this media, even though it's flopping. They're thinking that if they are the only people out here, they can get people to just keep buying their media, keep buying their media. But what's happening is people are pushing back against it, and they're pushing back against it because it's not saying what they know, and it's not resonating with them. I mean, these feminist movies like Terminator, they don't resonate with women because most women aren't feminists. Most women want to see strong, masculine men. They want to see powerful men. They want to see men being leaders. They don't want to take charge like that. It's not something that they're naturally used to, because a woman is used to serving and supporting a man. She doesn't want to be in that leadership role. And that's why these movies aren't resonating. But they're thinking that if we keep doing the exact same thing, people will eventually be convinced by it. But the whole thing is, the definition of insanity is when you do the exact same thing and expect a different result. And people just aren't wired to buy into these ideas. People are naturally wired to buy into the idea that women want to serve men, women want a strong man, and they want to see men in leadership roles. They want to see men being strong and confident, because when they go out here and choose a mate for a husband, they want that man to be somebody who can protect them, provide them. And the woke crowd don't understand that nobody wants a strong woman. They want to see certain male traits, and they want to see certain female traits. And if they don't see that, they're not going to watch the movie.
And they have been losing. They lost with Terminator, lost with Ghostbusters 2016. Star Wars was a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Due to Kathleen Kennedy. And I'm just like, now they're going to screw Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure up with Keanu returning, but instead of the boys they had, they're now going to be girls. And I'm like, Hollywood is not getting it. I'm like, you're losing money, and you will continue to lose money if you keep up with this whole gynocentric perspective. And the whole idea is, one of my favorite characters, or two of my favorite characters, was Sigourney Weaver, Ripley, and what's the name from Terminator? Two strong female characters, Sarah Connor. It wasn't broken. You didn't need to fix it. You know what I mean? It's like, leave it alone. You know, it's like those films were classics. They were great. You messed them up. Thank you, Shawn. I really we got to do this again, and we're going to talk about where we can talk about that whole subject matter of the films and Hollywood and what they're doing.
Well, I'll definitely want to do that show with you. I definitely want to do that show with you. I had a great time doing tonight's show. Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. So, hey, you know what? Like I said, I'm going to put Shawn's links in the description box. You guys check out his work. He's got some excellent work. Shawn, thank you, and we'll be in touch, okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, I want to thank you for tuning in today. Excellent interview with Shawn. Hope to have him back. We're going to talk about movies maybe in the near future. This is Kasank Ma Keperu, son of Ma and Tahuti. My aunt is a beautiful goddess, Heteru. Until my next video, I'm in Ra.